Hello and welcome to MalMakes. Today we're going to be painting a sunset scene inspired by Minecraft. This is the full version. If you're interested in the time-lapse, you can click on the card here. Otherwise, let's get started. For Minecraft, there were many things I could paint. I had a lot of ideas. So I actually did a few thumbnail sketches, and they're just really loose, tiny little sketches of different ideas of things I had. And I actually posted these to my patrons over at patreon.com, and a lot of people liked different things about it, but I kind of took a few different ideas they had and kind of combined them. So from there, what I did is I did kind of a bigger sketch, but added some color to it. So you can see that right here. So I'm going to try and aim for something like this, and like I said, it's going to be Minecraft inspired. It's not going to be quite a screenshot. So the first thing I need to do is start drawing. So with my drawing, I'm going to be using watercolor pencils, and I'm going to kind of mark in my horizon line here, and it's going to be at 9 inches because I'm going to go straight in the middle, and then I'm going to mark in where this top quarter is too, just so I have an idea. And I like using watercolor pencils. I also like to use chalk. I like to start with watercolor pencils because they're water soluble, of course, and it'll let me kind of get a good idea of where things go, and as I paint, the water from my brush and the water from my paints will just dissolve the paint and mix it into itself. So it'll kind of give me some help there. I don't have to worry about erasing it so much. And based on my sketch, I just kind of want to mark in the top fourth over there. For my sunset, I actually went into Minecraft and took some screenshots of the sun setting so I could make sure I got the colors at least somewhat close to the game. Now, unless I went into creative and sat there and built this, the landscape is kind of my own design. It's not really something that came from the game, but I'm just going to try and make it look like that. So to start with, I've mixed up kind of this light orange, and this is going to kind of be the first part of my sunset that's going to go around the sun. And it's going to kind of go pretty horizontal, and then it's going to fade into this lighter blue-violet color I've mixed. So I'm just going to go ahead and start laying this down. I'm also going to go ahead and take this same orange and start to block in the water because I have a lot of it, and the water is going to kind of be the same colors anyway. So I've laid down the orange. Next I'm going to pick up this blue-violet, and it's a light blue-violet with some white in it, and that's going to do basically the opposite thing. Whereas the orange faded upwards, the blue is going to fade downwards into that orange. Now, none of these are going to be the same color they are when I'm all the way done. They're just kind of the general color I want to use. I do it for a couple reasons, just so I can kind of see what's going on, but I also tend to show bits of the canvas through. You can see some here where it's softer, and you can see a couple little flecks right there of the white canvas showing through. This just kind of gives me a good base layer so I can paint on top of it with the real color for later. So right now I kind of have a brown, and it's way lighter than I actually want it to be, but that's okay. And it's also kind of this weird shade that I don't want, but I mixed it up using some of the colors I already had on the palette, and I'm just going to go ahead and start to fill it in where things will be brown. My next color to block in is this kind of violet. It's a blue violet. So I'm just going to go ahead and start to fill that one all in. So I finished doing my blocked in colors, and now I've mixed up my true colors. The blocked in colors were kind of like an underpainting, like priming a wall, if you're ever going to paint a wall. So I've done that, and now I'm using these true colors that are a bit truer to game. So the next thing I need to do is take this kind of bluish purple, and I'm going to fade that into the orange. So I've mixed up a new purple to start to fill this in and to clean up what I messed up redoing the sky. So I'm going to go ahead and paint this color, and then I'm going to use some more burgundies and some more indigo colors and some more violets to start to bring in some detail to this mountain. So I finished filling in that mountain with all the same colors, and now what I've done is I've mixed it in with a little bit more red and blue, and I'm going to go ahead and just start to fill in some lower lying hills with this color in here. Now this color I'm using a little bit more purple than I am blue like this is here, because I don't want these two to like look the same. So these ones are all going to be slightly purple and these ones are going to be slightly blue. So I have that next one in. Next I have a kind of a maroon color with a little bit of white in it. I'm going to start to bring in some of the details into some of these faraway hills with it. Next I'm going to use that same color with just a little bit more white, just to bring in even more highlights to this. Now I'm going to do the same thing for this closer hill I have, and I just took the same color I have here and added a little bit more red to it and just a touch of white so I can bring in these same details to it. And to finish this off, I have a little bit more of that violet with just a touch more white, and then I'm just going to go ahead and paint this reflection this color, and it's a little bit lighter because I want it to look a little more washed out because it's in the water. So I've been trying a few different things to get a color I'm happy with for this mountain, and I settled on kind of a reddish blue. It has mostly blue in it, and then I added a little bit of white and then just a touch of black to make it slightly darker. So the white and the black ended up just kind of making it a little gray. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill this in solid. And I'm actually going to paint this tree out because I think I drew it too big and then I painted it with my base colors too big. So I'm not too concerned about it, so I'm just going to paint it out and then later I can just paint it back on top of everything. So I filled in that mountain and now I just took the color with a little bit more white in it and I'm going to add in the same details I had done like the faraway ones. So I'm just doing a little bit of sketching to start to fill in where things are going to go. And I realized I wanted this mountain to be a bit blockier. So I'm just going to go ahead and work that in with this chalk pastel pencil. So I've remixed up the mountain color, and I'm just going to go ahead and fill it all back in and just be really careful to fill in where my pencil chalk marks are. Now that I've done that, it's time to work on that sun. So I'm going to go ahead and use the T-square to make sure I have a nice straight line, and I am changing where it's going. So it's going to go kind of over this way. And I have a lighter yellow here, so it has a little bit of white in it. And I'm going to go ahead and paint the whole box that light yellow for now. I've waited on the blue to dry, so I'm just going to add a couple more little areas of hills in it. Now I'm going to put some texture on this blue mountain, just like the background ones. So I have a little bit of a lighter blue here, and I'm just going to go ahead and kind of go around the edges, closest to the sun here. Now I'm taking an even lighter blue and just doing a couple little highlights, like I have done with the purple mountains. Now to finish off the sun, I'm just going to go ahead and fill in the very middle with pure titanium white. And this part is also going to be square. The yellow kind of frames it like a picture. Now it's time to move on to this island. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to move it just a little bit. I kind of want it to be a little further down. So I'm going to start by using my T-square and drawing in a horizon line. Just going to bring it a little bit further past where it was. All of the shapes are blocked in for the island, so it's time to start painting. You can see this dark brownish gray color I have, and that's going to kind of be my dirt color. So I'm going to go ahead and fill all of this in. Just like this island, I have the lighter version of this color, and I'm just going to use it to bring in a few little highlights to some of these pieces. Next, I'm going to do the same thing, but with this green I have, and this is kind of a darker bluish green color, and this is going to be where all the grass is for the shadows. Just like the brown, I'm going to add some highlights into over here. And I'm trying to only put them basically where the sun would hit. The highlights are sort of done, but I'm not super happy with them, so I'm going to use my chalk pastel pencil and kind of mark some things in, maybe add a few more tree trunks in just so it's not so even across the whole thing. So let me try some things out with chalk. I like the look of that, but now it's time to work on these trees. So I took that same dark bluish green I had down here, and I added just a little bit more yellow to it, just so it's a little bit different. And this is going to be my base color for my trees. So I'm going to go ahead and fill those in. The last thing I have to do for the island is fill in these tree trunks. However, I also need to do the reflection, and before I lose all these colors, I want to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and just start using this chalk pastel pencil to sketch in my reflection. I've marked in where my reflections go, and all my reflections have been a little bit lighter than the actual color they are. So I've taken this color here and just added a little bit more light gray to it. And then I'm just going to go ahead and block this in. With the reflection, you'll notice not only are my colors lighter, but they're also slightly grayer. So I kind of just took what I had for the original color and added a little bit of gray into it. It's time to paint the tree trunks, and luckily I still have this color I used for the dirt. I just added a little bit more burnt sienna and a little bit more black to come up with something I think works really, really well. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill all of those in. This has been a little bit of back and forth. Like, I decided to do some shadows over here, so then I had to bring it down here. But first I noticed it was too light, so then I had to make it darker. So it's been back and forth. You'll also notice that I left the reflection here a bit looser than I left this purple mountain and the blue mountain. I'm actually going to go ahead and fix that now because I like this style better, because it's not as defined and not as mirror imaged. So I'm going to go ahead and try and mix up this purple and this blue to give these guys the same texture as I did this reflection. All of my reflections match, but besides color, but we already talked about how it's going to be slightly grayer no matter what when it's in the reflection. But I kind of did this like fuzzy zigzag sort of line-ish for all of them, and all I did was remix my colors and kind of just bring it out a little bit. There's a few things I'm not happy with, like this bit right here, but I'm going to be putting highlights on my water and I'll just stick one on top of it. Next up I have my front island, and I just got to go ahead and start sketching onto it with my chalk. I just need to make sure that I don't leave any of this green I've already filled in the water. That would look strange. And then to get my straight line, I'll just grab my straight edge again and go ahead and start drawing that in. Now in Minecraft, everything is pretty much in 1-point perspective, which means if it's not vertical or horizontal, it's going to our vanishing point, which in this case is the very middle of the sun. And these are called orthogonals. So I'm just lining up the very middle of my sun with all my points, and then just drawing my lines. While I was drawing, I realized that this line here between the blue mountain and the water was really crooked. So I went and fixed it, and I've mixed up a new color, just so I can fill that in and make sure that's straight. Now I had a lot of that blue left on my palette, so I just added a little bit more black to it, and I'm going to actually add in a little bit of shadow for it. Basically whatever I have here on my palette left over, I'm just going to kind of throw in the bottom of this mountain. When I was painting that shadow, I used a lot of my glazing liquid so it was slightly see-through, which means I could just paint it straight on top of this reflection just to make it slightly darker. It's kind of like a blue piece of glass on top of everything. Now it's time to move back to this. Before I move on to painting this, I realized I totally lost all of the dirt I had here, so I'm going to go ahead and redraw that back in. Now I'm painting the brown before I paint the green because I'm going to have the green hang over the block a little bit, just like it does for the grass block in game. And this brown I'm painting here is burnt sienna with a touch of blue and then a touch of light gray. And when I wrap around the corner right here, I'm just going to paint it slightly darker because it's in shadow there. For the shadow, it's just the same color with a little bit more blue, brown, and black. While I have this dark brown color, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of texture to the dirt blocks here because I feel like they're kind of plain. So I'm just taking that dark brown and doing some dots. To put some texture on these dirt blocks so they're not just a solid brown, I have a darker brown that I just mixed the same one in with some more black. And I'm just going to go ahead and tap this on a little bit. For the tops of the grass blocks, I've mixed up a blue-green color and then I added just a touch of red to it to tone it down so it wasn't so bright. And then I'm going to go ahead and just fill all of these in. It's time to add the highlights onto this top part of the grass. So I have a yellow-green here, and I just took the green I had and added a little bit of yellow to it. And then wherever it's pretty much closest to the sun, where the sun would hit from the top, I'm just going to add a little bit of this. Now all of the grass blocks have this grass that comes down, so I just have some of my green left, and I'm just using a tiny little brush just to make this edge a little less square. On the vertical grass, I've done a few different experiments. Over here in the shadow, I had done blue at first, but it didn't look quite right, so then I did a little bit of a black. And up here, there's a little bit of a yellow, but then on this area, it's totally lost, so I'm going to keep trying a few things. So I used a little bit of light green and then just kind of edged these just so you could see the difference from the top of the grass block to the side of it. And it worked alright. There's probably a better solution, but it's kind of hard to tell, but at least visually you can tell a difference between the two now. So I've taken my green, added a little bit more blue and black to it, and I added a little bit of water so I can make more of a glaze, and I'm just going to add kind of a shadow over here. Next on the list is doing the reflection for the water. Now I've already painted the object's reflection, but I need to do kind of the highlight from the sun. So I'm just taking my chalk pastel and starting to lay in where I want that to go. For these lines, I'm using a high flow acrylic, which is basically sort of like an ink. And I have a very, very light gray here because pure white was too bright. I tried it out already. So I'm just trying to make sure my lines are super, super thin and I'm following my chalk marks. Moving on to the clouds, just like down here where I kind of roughly sketched in where I was going to go and then used my ruler to make sure things were straight, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of roughly sketch in some clouds. To paint the clouds, I've mixed up this pinkish orange color, and it's going to be the part of the cloud that's closest to the sun. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of block this in. Next, I'm going to add this blue-violet color, and this is going on the top of all the clouds, and it's going to just kind of fade down into the orange. So it took a little bit to actually figure out what I was trying to do with those clouds. I thought I had it set in my head, but it just wasn't working. So I tried this cloud a few times, and then I did this one a different way. And then I settled on the blue just wasn't working, so I went to a gray. And so now I have that pinkish orange color fading to gray. Next, I need to make them all 3D. While I'm waiting on the top clouds to dry, I'm going to go ahead and put my reflection clouds in. And I'm using that same orange I have up here, but it's just slightly lighter. And then I'm just going to kind of zigzag it with these tree shapes for the reflection. For the sides, I have a small brush with that same color with a little bit more white in it, and I'm just going to be real careful and fill it in. And I used my ruler to make sure I drew these lines too. And then once I have that, wherever it fades to gray, I'm just going to fade to a lighter gray up here. For the backs of the clouds, I have a very, very light gray here. You can kind of see it right here. And I'm going to paint that whole back rectangle this light gray color, and then down the side I'm going to fade it in with the peach color. I finished the top clouds, now onto the reflection, and it's the same as before, it's just a lighter color, and I'm just going to work in the reflection down here. I finished blocking the tree and it's time to start painting. So I have this burnt sienna color here, and it's kind of a darker brown, and I accidentally painted on the left side, but this is the color that's going on the right side. I'm starting to add in some details for the tree trunks, and all I've done so far is just take a little bit of black that's kind of watered down to make a glaze, and then I just drew these tree barks, just using a flat brush right on its edge. Then I'm going to continue the same motion with a few other browns, and this one is kind of halfway between black and the base color I painted it. Now I'm going to be using the same technique on the lighter side, and using mostly the same colors, but more of the lighter ones. It's really easy to see right now, but I left the top part of the trunk darker because that top part of the tree, where it starts being green, is going to cast a shadow on that trunk. So I left it that way. Now let's start mixing up some greens. For the tree I have a value scale of greens. I have 4 different colors. I have my lightest color that's going to go where the sun hits. Then I have my next lightest color that's going to go on this top plane, this back plane here. Then I have another darker color which is going to go on these front planes, the ones that face the top. And then I have a very dark green which is going to be this space over here. So I'm just going to go ahead and start blocking those in. It occurred to me I hadn't explained how I drew this tree. So you probably saw I had a 3x5 rectangle all blocked off, and those are representing my 5 blocks of how tall I wanted my tree to be. From there, all of these lines go to my vanishing point. Otherwise, just like the 1-point perspective I talked about down here, they're either vertical or horizontal. So I finished the light planes of the tree. I have the yellowish color over here, and then fading into kind of more of a bluish green over here to sort of be like a nice value scale between them. So this block, this one, and there's a tiny bit over here. Those are all done that way, but the rest are flat color. So I'm going to go ahead and start painting my other 3 colors that way. And all I'm doing is I'm painting them solid, and then on the part that's lighter, I'm just adding a little bit of highlight to it, and then just fading it into my medium color. And then on the opposite side where it's darker, I'm putting my darker color down and fading it back towards the middle. So I'm kind of just doing the edges that way. So I'm going to go ahead and keep doing this. I have some of the lighter green, the medium green, and then the very dark green yet to do. So I've chosen to repaint my dark blocks this blue-green shade because I think it was just too olive before and it wasn't working out. Now, while that's drying, I'm going to take a second to talk about why I've chosen to paint Minecraft. Now, I played it back early 2011, and my husband Steven, who at the time was my fiance, bought it for me. We were living apart because we were in different colleges in different states, so it was a really great game because he set up a server and we could play and go on adventures even though we were a really long ways apart. So it just brings back a lot of good memories to paint it. Another thing I can do while I'm waiting on my tree to dry is give the shadow on the ground for the tree, and I'm using a shading gray in high flow golden acrylics. And you can really tell where it is because it's shiny compared to the rest of my paints, which is completely fine because I do varnish my paintings after they're dry, and the varnish is actually glossy, so it just makes everything glossy in the end. I plan on signing my name in like a light green, but I need to let it dry from the white before I do that. Now I'm thinking this looks a little plain up here, so I'm just going to add in some grass. And I'm just using the greens I've used on the tree just to kind of bring some in. Now, I feel like my tree trunk just isn't dark enough. It's too bright, and I think it looks kind of like it's floating. So I'm just using some of that gray shading liquid that I have just to kind of darken it up. And we're done. We have our beautiful sunset overlooking the water based on Minecraft. If you're interested in this piece, you could buy a print or a poster or bid on this original canvas. There's links down below. Also, consider supporting me on Patreon. You can find out more at supportmal.com. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes of MalMakes, and I'll see you again here for another video game painting.